Hey, good afternoon. I'm Heather Sullivan, your host of Sullivan Smart Sense. Thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate you joining us. Today we're going to dive into a hot topic because I know so many people are affected by student loan debt. And of course, we've got a graduating class that's just coming out of college now. Some of those folks are going to be dealing with student loan payments soon. Maybe you've been struggling with student loan debt for years. It's really been an issue that's hampered a lot of people for decades in this country, the weight of student loan debt. And of course, we've been seeing a lot of talk about changes, a lot of changes we've already seen. So we're going to talk a little bit today about, of course, we've got President Biden making proposals about some student loan forgiveness. We're going to talk about how to get ready for the federal student loan payments that are going to be resuming August 31st. And of course, we're also going to talk about the changes to the PSLF program, the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. This is the program that's been in existence for years. But as you know, so many people who were serving in the military, working as teachers, working in the government jobs that were supposed to qualify for loan forgiveness after a period of years, a lot of them had a lot of trouble getting qualified for that. The payments weren't being counted right and all of that. So I have an expert who's going to join us today to talk about the changes that were supposed to improve those programs and also how you can make sure that you are on track if you're in that program as well. So please join me in welcoming Jason DiLorenzo with PSLF Jobs. It's great to see you again. Thanks for being with us.
Nice to see you too, Heather. Thank you.
Well, let's dive right into it today because
strong introduction there. We got a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. But let's dive right in because right now, I think one of the buzz things that people are talking about is this whole, concept of student loan forgiveness. And also we've got the payments that are going to resume in August 31st. We've seen this pause for more than 2 years. And so a lot of people just haven't been making those payments. Now they're putting their money, towards gas and food and all of these things that have gone up in price. What would be some of your advice to people to get prepared or maybe things they need to do if they're afraid they're not going to be able to afford?
Sure. Just as a refresher with what the CARES Act actually instituted here with the payment and interest pause is if you have federal student loan debt as of March 13th, 2020, so now over 2 years, no interest has been accruing on your loan. So it made sense maybe to not pay and put the money towards the inflationary concerns. And no payments have been required. And they were halted for everyone, whether you needed relief or not. It's been extended now 5 times. And as you mentioned, the latest date now is everyone is supposed to go into repayment on their student loans on September 1st. So in terms of preparing for that, if it doesn't get extended again, that's probably another discussion because with the midterm elections coming up and some increased inflationary pressure and now the market's seeming to succumb to that a little bit, it wouldn't be shocking if they extended to 12/31. But it would make sense to be preparing for a 9/1 repayment start date. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your loan servicer has current information for you. That is so often a thing that we don't update when we're moving or changing locations or any sort of changes that happen within your profile. You should let your loan servicer know about so that they can get in immediate touch with you. If there's a more frequent email address that you're using, certainly your address. You want to make sure that they have current information for you. And then the second component to that is if you were using a repayment plan that doesn't make economic sense for you anymore from 2020 to now, either because you've had a change in your income, you're going to want to make sure that you've determined what a payment you can afford. There's a menu of federal repayment options available for people today to where if you can't afford to pay anything now because either you're not working or your income is minimal or it's just not in the budget, there are options to do that without going into default today. So you want to make sure that you choose a repayment plan that makes the most economic sense for you of the menu of plans. And maybe we can get into that a little further. And then if you are ready to go back into repayment, which let's face it, a lot of people are are ready to, if you have high interest rates on this debt and you can afford to go back into repayment, and now the interest is going to start accruing again, pick a repayment plan and get rid of this debt, particularly if it has higher interest rates, like grad students tend to have 6 and 7% debt. Aggressively pay it down and potentially even consider refinancing to lower the rate, because once the interest rate goes away for the CARES Act, that could be, there could be an opportunity still to lower the interest rate if you're ready to go back into repayment.
Yeah, you mentioned loan servicers, and about 6 months ago, there was a change to a number of the loan servicers.
That's right.
The Department of Education, changed who their contracts with. What are you hearing from borrowers? Are they finding their servicers? And how is that going?
Great question. So the loan servicer change announcements that were made, the two of the larger loan servicers out there are going to be Fed Loans, I know we'll talk about PSLF. They're the contracted servicer currently for public service loan forgiveness, and Navient, which is the servicing group of formerly what was Sallie Mae, the private lender now, who still exists, but Navient is their federal servicing division. Just those two together affect about 16 million borrowers, and both of those servicers are leaving. Their contracts ended. So Fed Loans, it's intended that they'll be moving their servicing away. If it's PSLF specific, it's going to a servicer called Mohila. My experience, and having been doing this for over a decade, is that Mohila is a pretty high quality servicer with good servicing representatives.
I had Mohila for mine. Yes.
Oh, no kidding.
It was very, very smooth. Good with Mohila.
Our advisory has a couple of individuals that worked at Mohila, and they were very well trained and ready to do handle advocacy for borrowers, which is important. That's what we're doing here. And then Navient is moving their servicing over as well. I believe there's a single servicer prescribed there. I think it's called Maximus, and I don't have a lot of details about Maximus. And then Fed Loans will be distributing some to the other servicers that exist now as well. Great Lakes and Nelnet are two other larger servicers. The Fed Loans changes, we've started to see them move loans over to Mohila already. Fed Loans is still actually the servicer to do administrative things with for PSLF, unless Mohila has already taken over. They're still wrapping their arms around the PSLF stuff. And so we'll expect that to probably exist for the next 6 months to a year. But you're starting to see the servicer transfer now from Fed Loans. Navient signed on for another 3 years. And so if your servicer is Navient, you might not see changes for a little while longer.
Okay. Wow. You've got a comprehensive grasp of all of them, because there's a lot of them. So that was very good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. When we're doing borrower advocacy, you got to kind of know every profile here.
Yeah. Every player. Yeah.
Yep.
Before we dive into the PSLF, let's just talk briefly a little bit about, because I know a lot of people are watching because they're hearing just a lot of talk, a lot of news about this possibility of loan forgiveness in general. And so basically, we've heard President Biden say that he'd like to see this happen, but I know there's debate about whether he has the executive power to wave the wand and make money go away, or whether Congress would have to pass it. And we've seen amounts range from 50,000 to 10,000. What are your thoughts on this possibility? What do you think this might end up being?
Yeah, having my finger on the pulse of this, I certainly have an opinion, but it's just that. I think that he's struggling to get the executive authority. I think 10,000 would already be done if he felt comfortable with that. He's already come out expressly against 50,000. You've got a few loud voices there advocating for that have a wide reach, but he's denied that on more than one occasion. And I do think that because it was a campaign promise, that he would work to get 10,000 done for all borrowers if he was comfortable enough with the executive authority part. And I think that's happening right now. I wouldn't be surprised to see a decision around that align with when people go back into repayment. If he's able to do the 10,000, you might see, but you got to go into repayment in September. Otherwise, if that becomes more of a challenge, particularly with the economy the way it is right now, if this persists through the summer into the fall, you could see an extension out to 12/31 past the midterm elections and maybe a decision later. But I think he wants to get that broad cancellation decision done pretty soon here. The last I checked was 2 weeks ago, and it was a 2-week expiration date on wanting to have the answer. But the last I saw was struggle with the executive authority part.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you're expecting 50,000, this expert's opinion, I think be happy with around 10,000 if that's going to happen, and an expectation of going into repayment. But a broad array of other repayment plans that offer significant relief. I think that gets lost in the discussion around blanket loan forgiveness for everyone. Only 20% of borrowers were in a defaulted, neat state on their student loans prior to the pandemic. The majority of borrowers were dealing with it. It's a problem. But there are federal repayment plans that offer significant relief today. PSLF obviously being one of them.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive into that, because it was last fall, because we were seeing these ongoing issues with people that are veterans, they've served, they're teachers, they're working in government jobs, and they were supposed to be qualifying for these existing PSLF programs. So they made some changes to clean it up, to help people qualify. Let's just first talk about those changes and what are you seeing? Are those changes working?
Absolutely. So we'll start with, again, just to back it up, public service loan forgiveness. I always explain this very simply. It's not as simple as you've identified, and has clearly been the case for people early on navigating the program. But it has 3 simple requirements. You have to have the right kind of loans and be in the right kind of repayment plan while you're working full-time for the right kind of employer. And so those 3 things today are direct federal student loans, and everybody has those if you went to school on or after July of 2010, because the government nationalized student loans in July of 2010, and your lender became direct loans, which is the Department of Education. Prior to that, the Sally Mays of the world were participating in federal lending, and those loans weren't eligible for PSLF, but they could always be consolidated. Most people didn't know that, and the servicers had an incentive to not tell you that, and that was a problem. So the first part is the right kind of loans, and everybody that has those old loans can still qualify today if they have those loans. But prior to the overhaul that was announced, they were being told no. The second part is an eligible repayment plan. That's really any income-driven repayment plan, and the majority of borrowers have been using income-driven repayment plans in recent years. They've become increasingly popular and understood to provide relief and savings and interest subsidies and all of that. In more recent years, they've reached sort of a critical mass. But you have to be using an income-driven repayment plan on eligible loans to qualify for PSLF. And that will exist going forward. What the overhaul said and announced and has been implementing, I'll get into those stats in a moment, but if you had any kind of federal student loan, even that could be consolidated over to direct loans, that now counts towards PSLF, and any payment, not just an income-driven repayment plan payment. Because, there was talk about even forbearance steering, and I think that's probably something to mention as well here. But if you were in a graduated or an extended repayment plan and no one told you that you should be in an income-driven repayment plan, now any repayment status counts towards public service loan forgiveness, even on previously not eligible loans. And that was 90% of borrowers early on in the years of navigating PSLF. So the only risk that exists now and one is really there's no looking back point, is if you refinanced your federal student loans to a private loan because you were told no and previously, you can't go back and consolidate an already private loan. Hopefully you got a lower interest rate and you're on your way to success in eliminating your debt that way. But if you were told no before and you still have these federal student loans that were not yet consolidated to direct loans, you can do that now and anytime before October 31st of this year. I would say just do it right now. you go to the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov. They'll identify the loans there for you that need to be consolidated. Move those loans over to a direct consolidation loan and enter one of the income-driven repayment plans that makes the most sense for you, and you're on your way. Any progress that you've made toward PSLF on any other loans will not be interrupted by that. So I think your last question was what's been the impact of this. We've seen the number of borrowers that have received public service loan forgiveness grow. I think that roughly 1,400% if I just do year over year, 14x. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen the total amount forgiven go from less than $1 billion this time last year to we're creeping up on, I mean, by the time they report the next allotment of loan forgiveness, it'll probably be over $8 billion. So, 8 to 10x of actual dollars forgiven. And that number is now grown to about 120,000 borrowers as a result of the overhaul with immediate forgiveness, but over 1 million people positively impacted, meaning closer to forgiveness than they were before. And there's 1.3 million people navigating the program right now, which is $130 billion of federal student loan debt. So if I'm nerding out on math here and saying, let's just forgive that on average, equally over the next 10 years, you're talking about $13 billion of loan forgiveness year over year for the next 10 years, just with what's in the queue. So even what's happened now is a drop in the bucket.
Right. Yeah.
Compared to what's coming for the next, 10 years.
Yeah.
And there are 30, if we're going on with public service loan forgiveness, there are 35 million jobs in the US that qualify for PSLF. It's much broader than people think. So if you're a student loan borrower, with all of the positive changes here, and we might look back on this time in history as an overly generous loan forgiveness period. And just 2 years ago, we were talking about how painful and how oppressive it was.
Yeah. What a change.
Yeah.
Before we get into the jobs that qualify, one of the things that they tried to correct in this last round of reforms was that they found that there was what was called forbearance steering. And that was, people were basically steered into forbearance plans that really should have been in maybe like income-driven plans or, things like that. Are you seeing what kind of changes are you seeing from that, and how do you know if you were sort of steered to the wrong program?
If you were in forbearance for a long period of time, and it was not of your own volition to choose that. I mean, a lot of people chose forbearance because on the surface, if you're not, if you're not super familiar with the concept of accruing interest and the sort of negative consequences of that, and you needed payment relief, it was common for borrowers to just choose forbearance, and the servicers were compliant or complicit in saying, oh yeah, do that. I mean, because that extends the term out on the loan and they get more money, but because the interest is accruing with no benefits whatsoever. The change that was made specifically for people that spent long periods of time in forbearance, and this is, I believe they started counting this from 2009, which is when that practice became more rampant, is that if you spent a cumulative amount of 3 years in forbearance, then that time is now going to count towards public service loan forgiveness and also any income-driven repayment plan forgiveness. You don't have to work in a PSLF job to get federal loan forgiveness from the student loan programs that exist today. The income-driven plans can offer that. It's longer. It's not 10 years. It's 20 or 25 years, depending on the plan. But that still is the best outcome for a lot of borrowers, particularly if now 3 years of forbearance counts towards that, and that's already behind you. Also, if you spend any consecutive 12 months in forbearance, that's also now going to count as qualified payments towards either PSLF or income-driven repayment plan forgiveness. So I mean, if you're taking notes, it's any cumulative 3-month period where you didn't pay anything in forbearance, or any 12-month period that was consecutive, is now going to count towards income-driven repayment and PSLF forgiveness. Should note that that's separate from the CARES Act the zero payments that have existed now for over 2 years, that
Mhm.
counts towards all the loan forgivenesses similarly. And that's no additional review needs to be done there. That's been established.
Yeah. We got a couple of quick questions I want to share and see if we can answer. So Jocelyn's writing in, what if they already consolidated and I'm in the income driven already?
Yes, you're on your way to loan forgiveness according to the profile of the income driven repayment plan that you're in. This waiver period also said that if you had your FFEL loans, they were called, the pre-2010 federal student loans that weren't direct. If you had any progress towards PSLF on those loans prior to this overhaul, you were told that time didn't count. You should do an employment certification form if it's PSLF to make sure that that time is now gone back and counted for you. The government or the Department of Education won't take on the responsibility of reviewing past employment to qualify if you haven't ever submitted an employment certification form for that employment. So I don't know, Jocelyn, if you're in a PSLF role or you're just seeking income driven repayment plan forgiveness, but that the former there, the PSLF, requires employment certification. And so if you're trying to certify time pre-consolidation, you want to go back to the employer and make sure that they certify your qualified time there. But otherwise, the previous time will now count towards income driven already.
Jocelyn, thanks for the question. It's a great question. And we've got another one from Kel. Will I get a refund on the loan I've already paid back? I'm thinking no. But what do you say?
Yeah. So refunds have been happening. Yeah.
Really?
So let's say you made, because of having FFEL loans before, let's say you started the PSLF trajectory in 2008, but you didn't start accruing PSLF under the old program circumstances until 2011, right? And you made 2 or 3 years of payments on FFEL loans that would have qualified with the overhaul. You're technically entitled to a refund. You overpaid based on the circumstances of the overhaul. And there have been more than a fair number of borrowers who have received unsolicited refunds. And so now those circumstances, Cal, are complicated. I don't know exactly what your profile looks like, but we have been seeing refunds for people that overpaid when the overhaul was applied, and 6 years suddenly became 12 years.
Wow. Okay. Great question. Thanks for asking that, Cal. We got another one who says, what if I'm currently working on my master's? Should I still apply?
So if you're working on your master's, now I don't know with graduation time and all of that, presumably we understand that master's degrees are, when I work with teachers in schools or social workers in family and social services organizations, not uncommon to see debt levels of I think they say 23% of nonprofit employees have at least 90,000 of student loan debt. I've definitely seen profiles with 200,000 or more. While you're in school and accumulating debt, you're not able to meet the 3 requirements of public service loan forgiveness because you're in a loan deferment and you're not making payments, therefore, typically. And so you can't meet those 3 concurrent requirements. Once you're done with your master's and you remain in a qualifying environment, you'll start counting your 10 years right there immediately from when you graduate. Strategically, you could even consolidate and start your repayment plan immediately when you're done with your master's and achieve PSLF 10 years from when you finish your master's. And so absolutely, there's nothing to apply for until you actually have graduated. The loans go from a in-school deferment status to then a repayment status, where then you can start counting the 10 years. But absolutely, you should still plan on PSLF if the economics make sense, which is another, not everyone who has student loan debt and works in a nonprofit is a PSLF candidate. you have to make income-based payments for 10 years. If your income is substantial, you're going to pay your debt back in 10 years. So there are calculators at PSLF jobs that can help you calculate what the value of that is in the form of a salary boost.
We're getting a really big audience, by the way, and we're getting more questions in. But before we try and get to some of those, I want to just talk a little bit about what you do at PSLF Jobs.
Sure.
And how people can sort of make sure that the job that they have or find jobs that will definitely qualify.
Yeah. Well, if you're talking to a qualified employer that knows nothing about this, loop me in because they should really be helping you. I mean, if you think about it just from a strategic standpoint, and we talk about the Great Resignation and recruiting and retention the economic environment seems to be changing now, but the public service loan forgiveness program offers relief to people that work in qualifying environments, which is any federal, state, or local government or agency, or any 501c3 nonprofit, which is roughly, like I said, about 35 million jobs in the U.S. They get a federal subsidy to what they pay you when you get public service loan forgiveness. So it's a recruiting and retention tool for them. And so you want to make sure that the employer understands this and isn't denying this application from you. That should be less common now, but it still happens that employers say, I don't know what this form is. I'm not comfortable filling it out. But in terms of finding a PSLF qualified job, there's 35 million of them in the United States. I think the first thing you want to do if you have a high level of student loan debt is calculate how much actual savings is available to you through PSLF. If you are, and I'll just do a couple of examples here, but if you are planning on making, say, $90,000 a year, and your student loan debt is at $35,000 or $30,000 a year, in an income-driven plan, you're probably going to pay that back over 10 years. There's no economic benefit for you to take a nonprofit job versus a private sector job. There are certainly the professional and personal advantages of that. Maybe that's why you wanted to work in a particular nonprofit or public service environment. But economically, it's where you start to see that your debt levels exceed what salary you're expecting to earn. So, for example, a teacher with a master's degree, $150,000 of federal student loan debt, not uncommon, that is going to see a starting salary of $50,000 to $55,000. You're probably going to save about $150,000 payments wise. And that makes your salary of $55,000 worth, compared to the private sector, probably $75,000. So we have a calculator that will help people figure that out pretty quickly. And that's a first step, is figure out, can I get relief from PSLF? Or am I working in public service because that is a personal goal of mine? And then our jobs board features now probably 15,000 jobs that are being directly posted by PSLF qualified employers that want to help with this. There's 35 million out there, so we've got more to go. But any federal, state, or local government or agency job in which you work full-time, and you don't have to work the whole 10 years with that same employer. I started working with medical graduates, years ago, and they do their residency in nonprofit teaching hospitals. Then sometimes they go off to do a fellowship in a different hospital, and then they go practice in a hospital somewhere else. That's 3 different jobs that comprises the 10 years. And then loan forgiveness is available for graduate health professionals. So it doesn't have to be the same job. If you've got progress towards this, say 5 years of already qualified employment, certainly that next 5 years becomes even more substantial, especially if your student loan debt's grown over that 5 years. There's more value there.
Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. So Jean writes, I've been at my public service job since 2011. My student loans have been in forbearance since 2017. Haven't made a payment yet. When will it be on the income-driven payment plan? Should I apply?
So great question. I do think, Jean, that it would make sense to position yourself to go into an income-driven repayment plan Now, I'd rather have your loan servicer have your indication of going into an income-driven repayment plan now, so that right before September 1st, when there's probably a scramble for everyone trying to take action, you're already in the queue to go into an income-driven repayment plan. I don't know what you did with the loans from 2011 to 2017. Presumably, whether they were FEL loans, in other words, prior to when all loans were direct, there may be a consolidation that needs to be done there, and a payment count of those 6 years from 2011 to 2017. And then from 2017 to 2020, that's 3 years of forbearance. That would count towards qualified time for PSLF with the new stipulation that we discussed. And I would jump right into an income-driven repayment plan right when we go back into repayment from CARES. And I'd actually get that on record with your servicer now.
Okay. We're going to take one more question, and I know we've already gone longer than I promised we would go, but there's so much information you're sharing with us, so I appreciate that. But let's see if we can answer Janae's question. She says, so I'm a police officer for a school district with a master's degree. I've been out of undergrad since 2009 and grad since 2018. How would this benefit me?
So the first thing you'd want to calculate is, based on my student loan debt and my income, is there savings available to me? And then if that's the case, that's how it would benefit you. And so if you've been in a repayment plan since you graduated from grad school, which I presume is where the majority of the debt came from, then you got 4 years towards public service loan forgiveness complete already, where at least for the last 2+ you didn't make any payments. There might be some savings available there. So for you, if you go to the jobs board on PSLF jobs, and there's under resources, it says, how do I qualify for PSLF? There's a quick calculator there that you would want to indicate that you've made 2 years of payments or 24 months of payments there. And that'll, based on your debt and salary, kind of give you a quick calculation.
Okay. Listen, Jason, I want to thank you so much. I know you could go on for hours. You're such an amazing expert on all of this. So we'll definitely have to have you come back, because I know people just have lots of questions, and with so many things changing in this environment, hopefully we'll just continue to help people deal with the debt that they have, and be able to utilize some of the programs that are there that can help them. So thank you, Jason DiLorenzo with PSLFjobs.com. You could reach out to him there if you have anything further you'd like a little more help with. So we really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks for having me, Heather. Take care.
You bet. All right. And thank you so much for being with us. Again, also, you can go to studentaid.gov. That kind of is the comprehensive government site. Everything you need to know about whether you have loans, need different repayment plans, or if you want some more information about the PSLF, or just questions about any of the different kinds of loans that are out there. That's a good place to go. We will be back next week with another topic to help you save money. But if you have any questions on this or anything else in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach to me on Facebook at Heather Sullivan Fox 26. Just send me your questions and we'll try and get them answered. And we will see you back here next time with more ways to help you save